I want to talk about your beginnings at NBC. What kinds of shows did you do for NBC?
Well,
the first one you did.
The first one I did was a show that originated right down here on Western Avenue. All the shows that I did were remotes with jazz bands, jazz orchestras. They were remotes like even Las Vegas. That was a remote. The remotes, they all originated out of the dunes. The first one was right here, and it was with Lionel Hampton and his orchestra. And it happened because there was a banquet one day for the quote-unquote Negro press. And at this meeting, at this banquet, there were two vice presidents. And they told of all the many things that they were doing for the Negro community and the Negro artists. And it went on, and they had a very nice luncheon. And at the end, they asked, I was the only person there from radio because I was the only one in radio. And they were asking for questions and answers. And the press proceeded to say, well, you should advertise in our paper because we give cheaper rates in their paper, and our paper does more circulation than theirs and all this. So they were talking about the race music. So I got up and I said, forgive me, you gentlemen are vice presidents of this. At that time it was owned by RCA Victor. I said, one is vice president of RCA Victor Records and the other is vice president of NBC. And I know you're more knowledgeable than I by far. So for that reason, I'm asking you, can you tell me what race music is?
Good.
And they said, well, yes. What was that question again? I said, can you tell me what race music is? Now, I know what race music is.
Of course.
But they said, well, race music is the kind of music with that beat, 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 bam, 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 bam. I said, like Frankie Lane's Mule Train. They said, no, that isn't exactly what we had in mind. It's the kind done by black artists. Oh, I said, I understand now. Like Nat Cole's Mona Lisa? They said, no.
They didn't like you very well.
That isn't what we had in mind either. That isn't it. And I said, I have one more question. Well, maybe you can answer this one. When are you going to have a Negro announcer on your network? And they said, well, we hire announcers from independent stations, and there are no announcers on independent stations because we hire them from independent stations, so we hire people with experience. They've had a chance to work in the newsroom, with the music and what have you. And I said, I do that every day. They said, oh, well, we'll get back to that. And that was it.
That was it.
But the next day, I got a call from John West, vice president of NBC, who asked me to come over. It was Christmas Eve. And he asked me to come over. And he said, I am vice president of NBC. The way I got here is because when somebody asks me something that I don't know, I get to somebody that does know. And you stumped me yesterday. And I want to know, what is race music? And I told him. I left there that day with a case of scotch. They were just coming out with the first 45s. They were not popular then. And 4 players. I had about 7 boxes of 45s and 4 record players.
Yes.
And I asked him, when? He said, when the time is right, you'll know it. About 6 weeks later, I got a call about 3:30 in the afternoon at the radio station where I was working. And he said, can you do a coast-to-coast show tonight? I said, I think so. He said, well, we'd like to have you carry Lionel Hampton live from the Oasis at 8:30.
And the Oasis is where?
It was at 38th and Western. He said, we'll have a producer there, we'll have an engineer there, and we'll have a backup announcer there for you to show you the ropes. I said, fine. 8:30. I walked in at 7 o'clock.
Of course. Prepared again.
And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. About 8 o'clock, the engineer came in. 8:25, 8:26, 8:27, 8:28, 8:29, 8:30. I looked at the engineer. He pointed to me, and I said, live from Hollywood, NBC brings you the music of Lionel Hampton and his orchestra. We did the whole show and finished. Nobody has shown up yet. The next morning I called him, and I said, Mr. West? He said, yes, I know, nobody showed up. He said, because if I had told you that no one was going to show up, you wouldn't have shown up. He said, you did it. I heard the show. It was great. And that's the way I went on the air for NBC.
And how long were you with NBC?
About 10 years.
10 years.